Hi friends, Jenny at Clover and Violet here, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make little fabric stamps. These stamps are double-sided fusible, and so you can stick them on any project just like this. This is a great way to use those little fussy cuts and to add some detail onto a piece of fabric that you maybe don't want to make quilty, but you just want to add that little special fussy cut or something else. This is also a great way to save your scraps. Turn them into stamps and save them for later use. Let's head over to the cutting table and we'll make some fabric stamps together. Let's get started making some fabric stamps. First, I want to talk to you about the supplies you'll need to make the stamps. I'm going to be using this solid white piece of fabric for the background of my stamps, and then I grabbed a few cute fabrics with pictures that'll be great for fussy cutting. Then I'm going to be using Pellon Wonder Under because this fusible web, it's a two-sided fusible, so it has a paper on it. You can kind of see that this side is a little bit glossy. This is the fusible side, and then it has this paper which will peel off. So it's a two-sided fusible. And there are other two-sided fusible products. What I like about Wonder Under is that it is permanent. You can wash the product after you've made it, but it also is still sewable. So I've used other fusible products that were more permanent maybe, or advertised themselves as permanent, but then you can't sew anywhere on the piece. So if you wanted to use these on something and then quilt around them at all, you would not be able to if you used a non-sewable permanent two-sided fusible. Wonder Under is permanent and also sewable. And then you can see I have two rotary cutters here. I have my fabric rotary cutter that I'm going to use, and also this is my paper rotary cutter. I've mentioned this many times over the years, but I use an old blade on a second handle to cut anything with paper. So when I'm going to be cutting this fusible, if I want to cut it with the paper still on it, I would use this paper rotary cutter. The other things I have here are a rotary cutter with a wavy blade. You can kind of see that. And pinking shears, and so these are going to allow me to cut that decorative edge on my stamp. So let's get started by fusing a piece of Wonder Under to the back of our white piece of fabric. That's going to be our first step. I'm going to put these tools aside and our fussy cut fabrics, and I'm going to grab my little ironing board, and I have my little iron right here all ready to go. I'm using just solid white fabric this time, but I do want to make some stamps with some low volume fabric as the background as well. So then we're going to place this. Now you'll notice one side is going to be smooth, that's the paper side, and the other side is going to have a little bit of a texture, which is the fusible side. And you'll see my fusible is a little larger than my piece. I am just going to make sure not to let my iron touch this edge while I fuse it down. Okay, so now I've got just like a low level of stickiness, and I'm going to trim my fusible the rest of the way so that I can iron all the way to the edge. This is kind of an unnecessary step, but I feel like if the fusible goes all the way to the edge, it's easier to get the paper off. And obviously we're going to not remove the fusible from the whole thing on the white until we're ready to use our stamps, but this will just allow us to get a nice good fuse and not accidentally get that fusible on our iron. So this is my paper cutting rotary cutter. All right, we'll bring it back here, and then we're going to give it a little spritz. The dampness actually activates the fusible, so going to take your time pressing this so that every part of it gets nice and fused on. And if you're not sure which side is the fusible of your two-sided fusible or your Wonder Under, you can just take a little sandwich of fabric, put the fusible, feel both sides carefully, and then put it over a corner of the fusible and iron that, being careful not to touch your iron and not to accidentally fuse it to your ironing board. And then that will help you know for certain which side is fusible and which side is the paper. So now I have this paper backed piece of fabric, and we're actually going to set that aside, and we're going to cut out our shapes for our stamps. I'm going to cut my shapes a little bit larger so that I have room to trim down, so that, like I said before, the fusible will touch all the way. So I have 2 ballerinas on this piece I'm going to cut out, and you can see I'm giving her a lot of room. But I don't really want to waste my fusible, so I'm going to trim it down just a little bit. And then let's get this little one, do the same. So now we have 2 of our ballerinas ready, and I have a little scrap of the Wonder Under here. And again, you can see it's a little larger than my piece. Slide this back over, set aside that piece. So I'm just going to press her on a little bit and then remove this so that I can trim it down. Then we'll do the same with this next girl. Just press her on a little bit and then trim it down. And then we'll give these 2 both a spritz to activate that fusible and press and hold for a few seconds. Okay, so for our next step, there's a few different ways we could finish this inner portion of the stamp. We can cut her out with pinking shears or with our decorative rotary cutter, or we could just cut a square or rectangle out and then use the pinking shears or rotary cutter only on the white fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make all of these all the ways so that you can decide which finish you prefer. So since this girl is a little close to the edge, I'm just going to use the rotary cutter to cut her out 1/4 inch all the way around. You can see my ruler has this line right here. That's 1/4 inch. So what I want is to see if that is just lined up with the edge of her toe and her bun, and that this is kind of straight. So then she's going to have 1/4 inch all the way around her. I'm going to turn. Here's her fingers. I want to make sure that this line is straight, and we'll cut 1/4 inch. And you could cut an 1/8 inch or whatever you desire. I'm just choosing 1/4 because it's really easy for you to see on my ruler this 1/4 inch line. And I think her feet are close to 1/4 inch already. All right, so here we have 1/4 inch girl. We're just going to set her right here. Well, let's peel off the back. So my favorite way to peel off the back is I give it a tiny tear in the paper, and then I can usually use that to get the paper to release fairly easily. And so now it's a very soft but a little bit sticky piece, and we're just going to set it right here for right now. Now for this one, I'm just going to use my pinking shears, and I'm honestly going to just eyeball it about 1/4 inch. I do try to line up my pinking shears on the corner so that you have a little bit of a corner if possible. Then I have a little bit of a funny corner right there. I'm just going to grab some tiny scissors. You don't have to do this, but I think it will look nicer if I just trim that little bit off. Okay, but before we iron these two on, we're going to go back and make two more with the little record player, and I'm going to use my wavy rotary cutter, just so that you can see how these all work out at the same time. So I'm going to fussy cut these two little record players right here, and I'll just go back in with my scissors and cut it. So this time these are both kind of close together. So first I want to iron them nice and neat, and there's a crease, so I'll just see if I can get that out. And then I'm just going to stick both of these on a piece of Wonder Under at the same time. Okay, we'll just kind of stick it down just like we did before, and then trim it, and then we'll iron it down. Give it a little spritz. That's what's activating the glue. And then we'll trim these, but I'm going to use my wavy rotary cutter instead of the pinking shears. So first up, I'm just going to trim this little guy here in the corner. This one is much closer to the edge, and so I'm going to use the same 1/4 inch technique I used before, and this will just give me the opportunity to just have it nice and trimmed, since this one was already, like I said, closer to the edge. I mean, it's already a 1/4 inch on the bottom. All right, so here's one. I'm just going to put it up here with these. And then the second one, I'm going to use my wavy rotary cutter. So I'm going to do again a 1/4 inch, and this is just like a regular rotary cutter when you use it. Just going to push, and it will cut. Now, this 1/4 inch actually is a little closer, so I'm going to scooch in just a little bit and do more like an 1/8, because this is a bigger wave, can you see? So I'm just going to cut out a little closer, since it does leave so much on the other side. And I'll be honest, it takes a little practice to get used to using this. All right, let's do again, a little closer than a 1/4 inch. And one more time, I'm going to turn it and cut again. All right, there's our little radio with the wavy rotary cutter. But I really like how the wave looks on this. I like just the variety, and I feel like it especially goes well with this little boom box. So let me bring back my ironing board, and I have already peeled this one, but the rest of these need to be peeled. So like I said, I just make a little tiny tear just in the paper. You just have to be ever so gentle not to also pull the fabric threads. So we'll just peel these off. All right, so now all of these are ready to fuse, and you want plenty of space because each of these is going to have its own white border. So you need this much space around each one so that you have plenty of edge to cut on them all. So now we're just going to fuse them to this white piece, which still has its paper backing on. Spritz them down so they stick really well, and then we're just going to press. The general amount of time is about 8 seconds. Okay, so we'll just let these cool for just a second, and then let's cut them out. So as I said, I'm going to be using the pinking shears to cut both of these out, and then the wavy rotary cutter on both of these. But for starters, I'm just going to give them all kind of a rough cut so that it's easier to trim correctly. I'm using my paper cutter again because the white still has the paper backing on, and we could save this to make some more stamps. Then I'll just cut in between each of these, and then we're just going to trim them down. So we'll start off with our pinking shears. First, I'm going to pinking shear this one, and I'm just going to eyeball it. And I have no doubt as you make and sew more of these, you would get better at positioning your pinking shears. All right, so here's one. And then I'm going to use the little pinking shears to cut this one as well. So there you have a second. Then we'll switch over to our wavy rotary cutter. And for this, I'm just gonna line up the rotary cutter on, I'm gonna line up the blue edge on the 1/8 inch line, and then this is the last one. The one thing you do have to be cautious of using this wavy rotary cutter is that you don't nick your ruler as you're rolling along. And I feel like this is a little larger up here, so I'm going to just go back and give it one more to trim it a little bit. Try to kind of go in the same place I already did, and just get a little closer. There we go. All right, so here we have 4 different ways you can make your stamps. And then these will just, the backing will peel off, and you'll just fuse it onto your object. So you could use this to make little labels for things, just to use your favorite fussy cuts. There's all sorts of options. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I'd love for you to leave a comment and tell me which of these 4 is your favorite. Straight edges plus pinking shears, double pinking shears, straight edges plus wavy rotary cutter, or double wavy rotary cutter. I'd love to know which one you prefer and what you would like to use these fabric stamps for. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see what you create.